All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Sareth and a new contributor to Done.js and CanJS, and I'm going to try to make a how-to video on contributing to CanJS as quickly and as clearly as possible. So with that, let's get started. So the issue that I want to do is I'm going to work on this CanYouTill that is just going to add a assign non-enumerable. It's going to create a module called assign non-enumerable that is just going to run through. It's going to assign all of the values here like a normal assign, but it's going to make them so they're non-enumerable, which is really nice if you don't want these things to be iterated over when they're added to things. So the first thing to notice is that CanJS is now split into a lot of different sub-projects. So I'm going to be working on the CanYouTill sub-project. So I'm going to clone that from GitHub. Sometimes if you're not an official contributor, you're going to want to fork this and then clone your fork. But since we are official contributors, we will directly clone CanYouTill here. So make sure you have GitHub set up appropriately, Git and GitHub set up appropriately before you do this. But I should be able to git clone, git at github.com, CanYouTill, or CanJS, CanYouTill. So I'm going to cd into that. And I'm going to open up a new project. CanYouTill. Okay, so here's my CanYouTill. Now, the one thing it doesn't have is, well, it does have this package.json, which has all of the dependencies, dev dependencies used to test this and to actually run its tests and pretty much do everything with it. So that's the next thing I need to do is I need to have, I think it will work if you have an older version of Node, but it's good to have 5 or later. I'm going to run npm install. And this is going to install all of its dependencies. Now, this is going to take a little bit. In the meantime, I'm going to set up hosting. So I've cloned CanYouTill in this development folder. I'm going to want to just host all of the static files in my development folder, just so I can see them. And I'm going to do this with HTTP server. That is a Node plugin that you can install. I'll make it a little bit bigger. That's a Node plugin you can install globally, and then you can just run. Whatever way you host your files is fine, but I'm hosting my development folder. So this means if I go to localhost CanYouTill, I can see everything there. And you should be able to do this with Apache and whatnot. All right, let's check on still installing stuff. Okay, so while I'm installing things, I want to also talk about how this is set up to test. So everything has its own, every module has its own tests. There's the module inside of kind of its own folder, and then it has its own tests. And this is how CanJS and how really Bitovi builds everything. This is called a modlet. So what we're going to want to do eventually is create our JavaScript. Let's see what it was called again. We'll call it assign non-enumerable. We're probably going to create a folder there, and it'll have its own tests and its own documentation. Let's see. All right, it's done. So we can now verify that this project's tests are running. What you'll notice in almost every single CanJS project, there'll either be a test folder or a test.html page. In this case, there's a test folder that has this test HTML. If I run that, I will see I'll see all the existing tests pass. Now this is where you typically want to get to before you start making changes. It's like, okay, now we at least know we've gotten the repository down, all of its dependencies installed, right? Everything is working. So the next step I'm going to do before I make any changes is I'm going to make a branch for the work that I'm doing. I typically start the branch with whatever issue number that we're working on. So I'll do a git checkout -b to make a new branch, and I'll do 101. And I'll typically do some like non-numerable assign or some name related to the issue at hand, but not too long because you have to write it out a lot. So assign non-enum. I'll write enumerable. Okay, so now I've got a branch, and here's where I want to make my changes, verify that they're not working, and then write the code so that things are working. So what I'm going to do is in this JavaScript folder here, I'm going to make a new folder called assign non-enumerable. And then I'm going to make a test. And what I'm going to do, just to save some time, is I'm going to copy another test. I'm going to make the right changes. So this is going to load the module. That we're writing. And then I'm going to make sure that we know which module we're testing, assign non-enumerable. And then what I'm going to do is these should work pretty much the exact same. And what I want to see is what I should actually expect is that all of these properties, we're going to have to add some properties. So we'll say A already exists. But we're going to add B and C. And what I want to see is that if we loop, we're only going to see A. But B and C are going to be added. So we have to change this test around a little bit. The first thing I want to make sure is unit.equal A and B are equal, or A and actual are the same thing, because it should just return A kind of extended with B's properties. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to do a for loop. And I'm going to make sure that property is it's only going to be A. So I'm going to if prop is not equal to A, property A, that means it's B or C and something went wrong. So I'm going to do a unit.not OK. I think that's there. I always just do OK, false. Prop, we got a prop of, and I can add it, prop, to let people know something went wrong. And then the final thing I want to do is just make sure B and C got added correctly. So I'm just going to do actual.b. I'm going to say that's equal to 3. And C is equal to 2. Now, one other thing I want is that these things are enumerable, but they're also writable. Like at least I want assign non-enumerable to work that way. That's going to be important for like a lot. This is really a utility for a lot of inner CanJS stuff, and a lot of those things should be rewritable. So that's what I'm going to check, is that I want to make sure that I can like overwrite B and that things will work. And then I'm going to make sure that that's true. Okay, so now we've just added a new test. A lot of times in most projects, you'll actually be adding tests to the individual test files. But if you're creating a brand new test, here I'm also going to create my my module. A lot of times, if you do create a new test, so if you do create a new test, you need to make sure that that's going to be loaded. So here we can see that in the JavaScript folder, there's this tests file. And a lot of times you'll find these. These are going to load every other test. Typically, they're going to be alphabetical. So you want to keep them alphabetical and not, so it's easy to find what's missing, or if something's missing, just make corrections. So make sure you keep this alphabetical. And I'm going to do assign. Oh, so look at this convention. I did the wrong name here. This should actually be assign non-enumerable test. And I'm just, because I don't want to rewrite that, I'm going to copy this. And now I'm going to make sure my test points that to there. So here now I'm making sure that my test page that loads every other test is loading the assign non-enumerable test. And now when I rerun, I should get a break. Assign non-enumerable is not a function because we're not exporting anything. So now it's time to export something. So I'm going to copy this, and we're also going to make sure the documentation is working. So I'm going to work on that second though, but I'm just going to paste this in here, and then I'll fill the documentation out later. So this is the assignment, and what we're going to want this to do is use object assign property, or object define property. We're going to define onB prop, and we're going to make sure that this is not enumerable. It's writable though. We definitely want it writable because that was that like last test. And then finally we want the value to be the value. Okay, I think that should work. We can rerun just this one test by clicking here. Hey, it worked. Awesome. Okay, so now all our tests are passing. That's really good. But it's good to always have documentation. So to make the docs work, I've already checked out this CanJS project here. This is CanJS's major. Soon it'll be merged into master, but this is CanJS. And what this does is it loads every single other module, if you will, and it makes the big CanJS website. So I've cloned that, and I've npm installed it. And what I'm going to do is, by the way, a lot of this stuff is present in CanJS's site. But here on documentation, I want to test this new docs. What I'm going to do first is actually have something show up. So I'm going to kind of copy this. I'm going to say, hey, I'm just going to copy a little bit, and then we'll add to it. I'm going to say this is the assign non-enumerable module. Okay, so I put a little bit of documentation, and this page here in the guides contribute section talks about how to write good documentation, where to put it, things like that. But also talks about how to test the documentation out locally, and how to, somewhere in here, there we go, test out content from other repositories. So this is what I want to do, is I'm going to basically install my local version of CanYouTill into CanJS. And then I'm going to run CanJS's bitdocs command that will basically run the documentation, but with my new and improved version of CanYouTill. So here, I'm just going to change this. Instead of doing CanCompute, I'm going to use CanYouTill. And I wrote something wrong. Oh, because I need to be inside my CanJS folder. This will install, again, my local CanYouTill, and then it's going to run CanJS's documentation. but I did something wrong again. No modules bin, maybe my CanJS, or I wrote this wrong. That bin bit docs debug. I didn't say, unless I wrote something wrong. Bit docs debug. Okay. I might have made a mistake here. I will figure that out and fix it. Anyways, that will run the documentation. And then I can go to my local CanJS and see my locally generated site. And I could now hopefully go, this is in CanYouTill is an infrastructure project. I can go to CanYouTill JavaScript, and now I can see my assign non-enumerable. Now I can improve its documentation to the level that I like, which I'm basically going to copy this again and just spaces here. Go flat. Hold on. I'm gonna just, I don't know why the spacing is all off, but I fix it that way, and then I'm going to use assign non-enumerable. I'm just going to quickly fix up the docs here. Show the example. I'm not going to fill out the documentation fully for right now for this video because it would just take too long and I have to go back and forth. But once I was happy with the documentation and how it was showing up on the site, I'll finally make my commit. Actually, before I do that, I will always run npm CanYouTill, and in every one of our other projects, you can run npm test to make sure that all tests are passing. It looks like I did something wrong. Oh, it looks like in non-enumerable, JS hint isn't passing because this should be using kind of triple equals. That failed. Now I'm going to try to run it again. Just going to make sure everything works. Everything passes, and now I can make a commit. So I'll make something like adds, assign non-enumerable for, and I'll include the issue number 101. And I'm going to push that to my branch. And what's going to happen is CanJS is going to see this CanYouTill, and I'm going to make a pull request for it. I generally put this here. Now it's good to, if this is a very complex change, and even now I might say like, uses object.prototype to, or object assign define property. I'll give some explanation for complex. This is actually pretty simple where I wouldn't, but if it was a complex issue, I would put a little bit of information so people know exactly what's going on. But I would say to make the added properties non-enumerable, but still writable. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to create a pull request. And then our continuous integration system is going to run those same tests that ran when we ran npm test. Once those pass, I do a merge pull request which I'm not going to show in this video. And then finally, I can check out master. And if I wanted to make a new release, I would run npm run release pre or patch, depending on if I wanted to make a patch release or pre-release, or if we were, in this case, actually, we're adding a new feature. So once 3.0 comes out, I'd actually probably make this a minor release of CanYouTill. So that is how you contribute and publish a new version of one of the CanJS's sub-projects and test and document it. Cool. So any questions? Is that good? You got everything you think you need? Sorry, you broke up a little bit. What'd you say?
I don't have one doubt.
What?
Again?
I can't hear you.
You cannot hear me.
Oh, I can a little bit. It's very scratchy.
Okay, my doubt is this, like the documentation which you have uploaded will be automatically reflected in the CanJS file.
I can hear you. Let me end this, and then I will call you back on a Hangout. Sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. Hopefully you'll be encouraged now to contribute to CanJS. Thanks.